This is the Impunity Observer podcast. Fergus Hodgson, your host. I'm publisher of the Impunity Observer and always privileged to do these shows. This month, I am speaking with a gentleman up in Nova Scotia, Canada, Antigonish, an old town I've been to many times and have a soft spot for. And we're going to be discussing the Atlantica Party, or former Atlantica Party. This is a topic of interest to anyone who's looking at starting a new party, especially in the classical liberal tradition. We have the former official agent, treasurer, and former leader, Ryan Smyth. Welcome to the show. I'm so pleased to chat with you. He's a software developer by trade, and his personal blog website is cynic.me or .me. Ryan, welcome, and tell us, mate, maybe just for people who are not aware of the maritime provinces of Canada, or Nova Scotia is part of Atlantic Canada, or if you want to be technical, the maritime provinces. It can get confusing for outsiders. What is this part of Canada that is considered a, quote, have not or forgotten part of the country?
First, thank you for having me on, Fergus. For Nova Scotia, it used to be a very prosperous place once upon a time in the long, long ago. Not so much anymore. You know, one of Nova Scotia's greatest exports is its youth. And it's, very common for people to go out to Alberta to get a job.
Yeah.
The Nova Scotia has been in decline. There's a welfare culture. There's people aren't as prosperous as they should be. There's a lot of regulation that stops people from being, prosperous. Just a silly example, and this happened a number of years ago. Probably, I don't know, around 6 years ago. I'm guessing. I'm sure I'm off, but they changed the HVAC regulations. So when you went to your plumber or HVAC place and you wanted to buy a heat pump, you couldn't, because they changed the regulations, and only certain people, with certain certifications or whatever could install them, whereas before they could.
Yeah.
They made it illegal for people to do work that they're perfectly well qualified for. Another example is pharmacists. Pharmacists are perfectly capable of doing a whole bunch of things that they're not allowed to do. And instead, a doctor must, perform certain services. So we have a healthcare crisis, and we're stopping qualified people from doing what they're trained to do. And it's all regulatory. Those are some of the problems, of course, in Nova Scotia. Like, a very large portion of the population is rural. So, now with, gasoline prices, way up. I remember, during the last Trump administration, gas here got down to 62.3 or 62.9, I forget, somewhere in there, cents per liter. And now it's over $1.63 per liter. I think it's $1.67.
Almost tripled.
Yeah, it's $1 above what it used to be, over $1 what it used to be. So, when you live rurally, you've got to drive everywhere, and like the distances, can be long in Canada.
Just to give people a little bit of context, though, Canada has 10 provinces and 3 territories, and 4 of the provinces, Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and New Brunswick, are considered Atlantic Canada. And of those provinces, PEI, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia are considered the maritime provinces. And it's just such a fascinating part of Canada because it doesn't get a lot of attention, but it is the oldest part of Canada. In fact, there was a Viking colony on Newfoundland from about, I don't know, was it the 9th century or something like that? Very long time ago. So it's the oldest part. And also Newfoundland, the island, which is off Nova Scotia, until the 1980s, had this almost like little island of Irish and was it Irish and Scottish and English settlers who had been isolated from the world for about a century. It was this really odd culture. And so,
Canadians too.
yeah, so the French Acadians are French colonies, settlers too.
Yes.
Yeah. So now, just as a little bit of context, also, when I got out of college, my first regular job was in Halifax, Nova Scotia. This is 2009. And I got to know the area well and grew an affection for it. And Ryan is correct that once a region gets on this downward spiral, people cling to government, right? You build a welfare dependency. And not only is it dependent on the individual level, the province is dependent on equalization payments from the rest of the Canada. So it's getting handouts from the province itself as welfare dependent. And it was a shock to me that in Nova Scotia, people revere government jobs. It's like the be all and end all. It's really it is, as you said, it's a strange culture in that regard. There's also a strong anti-American sentiment, which I found strange, but it's just that's what's there. So now, were you there? The Atlantica Party struck me as unique. I didn't get to know the people well when I was there, but so the Atlantica Party was, I guess, just coming into being when I was there. And were you around at the beginning?
No, 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 no. I lived outside of Canada as an expat for uh, 20 years or so,
Oh,
and
right.
got back to Canada in 2015 and moved to Nova Scotia in 2016 and joined the Atlantica Party in 2017.
Okay. Yeah. So, but the Atlantica Party, I just loved the idea. There was this group of upstart guys who wanted to disrupt the unhealthy status quo, right? This welfare dependence, kind of dour status quo, unfortunately, that has existed in Nova Scotia and the Maritimes. And so the Atlantica Party had all these wonderful ideas. And basically, as I said, under the broader classical liberal tradition, a little bit pro-freedom, a bit pro-deregulation, a bit more responsive to constituents, nothing too radical, trying to be accessible to the voters. And you just had many problems, right? So in Canada, the two major parties broadly, I mean, there are lots of little parties, but are the Liberal Party and what has become known as the Conservative Party of Canada. And is it the Liberal Party that dominates Nova Scotia these days?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Nova Scotia is pretty red in that respect.
Do you want to tell, so you came into Atlantica Party halfway through its existence. Let's say it was around for about 15 years, and you were about 7 years into its existence. What what did it actually achieve over its 15 years of existence?
It had run two or three candidates, you know, in elections, before I joined. After I joined, I was quite active, and some other people were quite active. One of the things I think really helped that was I couldn't make meetings in Halifax, and most everybody was in Halifax. So I said, "Hey, why don't we shift this online?" And we took meetings from once in person monthly to weekly online. Very easy. It was 1 hour. And nobody had to go anywhere. You do it from home. So that really helped get the activity in the party moving. And we were able to field 14 or 15 candidates, 2017 or 18. I forget now.
Now, these were all provincial legislative candidates?
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah,
Provincial
yeah,
legislature. Yeah.
yes, yeah, for Parliament House in Nova Scotia, Halifax.
So the Atlantica Party was a new party formed in Nova Scotia, but with the idea of serving the four Atlantic provinces. And at its peak, it fielded maybe a couple dozen candidates for the provincial legislature. And it also put out many statements on policies and policy ideas. And it did get its leader into some debates. So at the end of the day, what would all these candidates say it was worth it? That running candidates and losing by huge margins?
We're a new party, not well known. The point of running isn't so much, to win, which you're not going to against, the incumbent, whether it's liberal or progressive conservative. But what you can do is you can get some issues on the table. You can put some ideas out for people. So what you're doing is maybe not so much, running for office as it is a kind of evangelism. So you're getting ideas out there. The idea that, greater freedom leads to greater prosperity and greater wealth. This is borne out through history. R.J. Rummel has a site that quite a few people are familiar with called Power Kills. He passed away, but the University of Hawaii still maintains the site. Last I checked, anyway. Rummel found that with increasing authoritarianism or increasing totalitarianism, with less democracy, you find that governments kill people, and he called that democide. But you can also extrapolate from that, and you can look throughout history, and see that with greater freedom comes greater prosperity, greater wealth, a healthier and happier society. And the Atlantica Party principles were entirely centered around, that classical liberal type of freedom. Your right stop, right here at my nose. This kind of thing. So, like I'd mentioned before about, pharmacists, give them the freedom to do what they're qualified to do, and you will have a better healthcare system. You'll have healthier people. You'll have a more prosperous society when people are healthier. These kinds of things are pretty basic, but as it stands, you can look at any party out there. Every single party has only one solution to every single problem: spend more money. That's their solution to everything. You can check, it's always spend more money. It's never anything else. It's always that. But you can improve society with the stroke of a pen for free, for a cost of nothing, by just simply eliminating some regulations that stop people from, doing what they're qualified to do. Getting those ideas out there is really the most important thing for the candidates, because everybody pretty much knew, when they ran, that they weren't going to be winning. They weren't going to be, sitting in Parliament House in Halifax, in the legislature. Some people ran on paper. Some people actually, were active out there campaigning to get votes. Always hear this objection: you're just wasting your vote. You're just throwing it away. And this is, one of those myths out there that people really need to get out of their heads. Your vote isn't wasted when you vote for, something that's not going to win. What you're saying is, these guys over here, the big three, we don't have any confidence in them anymore. We don't believe in them anymore. There are better ideas over here. And whether you get, 10 or 50 or 200 or 1,000 votes or whatever, those numbers, say something, to anybody that's paying attention, that a lot of people are dissatisfied with the status quo. So really, I think this is the most important thing for anybody that, wants to consider running. And knows that they're not going to win, don't worry about it. Just run, get the ideas out there, do it, be active. Because if we don't do something, who will? And if we don't do anything, nothing is going to change. So getting those ideas out there, pushing the conversation can make a difference. And we did make differences because the PCs actually did end up adopting some of what our platform was.
Were you one of the candidates?
Yes, I've run twice.
Okay. Well, because right now, everywhere, it seems, there are minor parties. And famously, just this past week in the United States, RFK Jr., what is his middle name, Kennedy, he decided to not continue his candidacy for the US presidency and back Donald Trump. And I guess because he thought in his case, like he didn't want to only be an evangelist. He also was really looking at who would win the race. And he thought that his support could have gone to a better cause. But right now in particular, I know in the prairie provinces, there are lots of smaller parties promoting autonomy or independence for Saskatchewan, Alberta, the Buffalo Party, the Wildrose Independence Party of Alberta, the Alberta Independence Party. So there are all these groups, and you don't think they're just wasting their time. You think they're bringing the ideas to the table that need to be brought.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. At some point, though, is there a problem that in the case of Alberta, there were two parties, Wildrose and the Conservative Party, and it did actually allow Rachel Notley of the New Democratic Party, the NDP, to become the Alberta Premier. Does that not concern you when we get to a situation like that?
No, not really. Notley really kind of destroyed Alberta. She did a heck of a lot of damage there, but she only lasted 4 years. And she got kicked out because people saw just how horrible, those kind of policies were. So, it's there were 4 years of self-flagellation, and they got tired of the pain. So, splitting the vote is a concern. One candidate, absolutely took the progressive conservative vote, and the number of votes he had that otherwise probably would have gone to the PC candidate were enough to elect the PC candidate, and he lost, and the Liberals got in, and a fair number of people were rather upset with that, but this is one of the problems with first past the post, but it's just the way the game is, and if you want to play, if you can play short term or you can play long term, and if you really honestly want to turn things around, you can't think short term, because that's what everybody does. Like if we look at government policies, they're short term band-aid solutions on cancer. They don't have any real solutions to actually fix problems. They're just going to spend money and then do a victory dance.
For mining stock recommendations, one newsletter I read is Global Analyst by Adrian Day, and I'm more than pleased to direct other people to his insights. Receive a 10% discount when you subscribe with the FERG coupon code. Go to adriandayglobalanalyst.com and click subscribe at the top right. You can also call the US phone number 410-224-8885 and mention the FERG code. That is adriandayglobalanalyst.com You can also click the link below or in the show notes. Thank you. So I tend to agree with you that the Atlantica Party, and you can still go to atlanticaparty.ca. It redirects to a page, a placeholder right now on cynic.me where he's working on the archive. But I tend to agree with you that the Atlantica Party, albeit humble or small in stature, did change the debate in Nova Scotia. And so that would be the legacy you left. Now, assuming that it did have an impact, it did change the debate or introduce new ideas that the Progressive Conservative Party, which again, this is confusing to foreigners, but in Canada, you'll have a federal party and then a local or provincial affiliate, and they'll often be named differently. So in Alberta, they have the UCP or the United Conservative Party, and then at the federal level, it's just the Conservative Party. It's going to get very confusing. And then there's the Bloc Québécois and the Parti Québécois, right? So in the case of Atlantica, it was a provincially focused party that never, as far as I know, ran any candidates for the federal elections. So why then did the Atlantica Party run out of steam? If the party was having an impact, and in my view, an outsized impact, why did it not continue and grow?
Warm bodies. We simply didn't have enough people willing to put in the time and effort. And, as, some of the executive left, there were executive positions that needed to be filled, like the treasurer and the leader and the official agent, all of which, I stepped in to do on paper in order to fulfill the legal requirements of being a party, and I am not the right person to be the official agent or treasurer. That is not something that I am good at. The official agent is arguably the most powerful position in a political party, but it's also dull, boring, and difficult. And we were never able to replace the previous official agent. I'm not the right person to do it. I ended up being the treasurer as well. I do not like bureaucracy. I do not like administrative work.
You don't want to be ticking boxes, but unfortunately, you have to tick boxes to maintain a registered party. And why were there not? I mean, we're all just the young, let's say classical or just liberal oriented youth. Are they just all leaving the area? Was there no new blood entering the mix?
We didn't have a recruiter. This is a really important role that you need. You need recruiters, people to go out and get people to volunteer, to support the party in any way, whether it's through financial donations or helping out with events. Recruitment is really important, and we ran down to the point where we just didn't have the manpower to get things done, and I simply couldn't continue as the official agent, because for a lot of reasons. Like audits are an absolute nightmare. You need to be penny perfect. Everything is scrutinized, down to tiny amounts. And I'm good at making money. I don't want to count it, so much. When I look at, okay, there's, this is off by $20 or 200 or 2,000. It's not something that I particularly care about. The auditor cares about, and Elections Nova Scotia cares about. Without people that could properly fill the roles, it was just kind of time to say, listen, we haven't been able to, get enough core support at the executive level, to continue.
Are there still many people in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada with a more classical liberal mindset. Is there also, I mean, I know this is one of the more just ideas that was thrown around, but is there any will for an Atlantic Canada separate sovereignty or independence?
Two questions. One, are there classical liberals out there? Absolutely. You know, most of the time when I'm talking to some random stranger, when I'm out, at the grocery store and or hardware store, start up a conversation with somebody. The people, like the idea of freedom. They like, those classical liberal ideas. They like the idea of fiscal responsibility. For the question of Atlantic separatism, there were quite a few people in the party and supporters of the party that wanted Atlantic separation, wanted a maritime separation. And so that was there, but it was never put forward as a policy simply because it was a little bit too far for such a young party to
Push.
put on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, because I don't know whether you have a strong opinion about this, but in my opinion, within about the next 20 years or so, Canada will break up. And whether it's Quebec or Alberta, the country just seems on such an unsustainable path, right? Am I just misreading things? I live here in Colorado.
No, 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 no. I don't think you're misreading things at all. And I don't think it's just Canada. I think that there's a strong probability of civil war in a few countries. Quite a few people have been predicting it in the UK. It's been mentioned, by quite a few people again in the US. In Canada, God knows.
Do people have
What,
enough testosterone to fight?
yeah, like how are Canadians very often described? Sheep. Bah, and the Canadians aren't as aggressive as people in a lot of other countries. I lived in Korea for a long time, and you know they'll fight. When the government tried to hike the tax on soju, no, 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 no. That was darn near revolution. There were, hundreds of thousands of people out on the streets of Seoul, protesting against that. It was like, no, you don't touch soju. No. Here in Canada, we just, oh man, more tax, I guess. Oh well.
But the thing is, but just what I mean though is that although there might not be broad desire for Atlantic Canada independence, which would mean, I guess, a new confederation of the four provinces, and maybe Newfoundland and Labrador would be separate provinces. I don't know how that would work, the but if Quebec and or Alberta got the ball rolling, then everything would be on the table. It just seems like that would be the catalyst to make it a possibility.
Yes, yeah, I think there is a very good chance, that Canada could break up. I don't think it would come down to shooting. I think it would come down
You don't
to
need to shoot anybody to make this happen. Yeah.
yeah. I think it would come down to, like you said, Quebec and Alberta, and Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, sort of naturally form a block there. And if Alberta wanted to separate, and if I were Saskatchewan, I'd want to stick with them.
No doubt about it. Yeah, yeah.
British Columbia is really a separate place. The mountains, the mountains between Alberta and BC really have created two very separate cultures, and that goes back, historically, like back into the 60s and 70s. Again, they were different places, and today that's still true, and it's that physical separation. But I think that if Canada breaks up, it's going to be a lot of nasty words and the provinces simply saying goodbye to Ottawa and Confederation.
I mean, it would be a health. One of the challenges that is that we do have such a status quo bias, and we think what exists now must be the best way. But of course, it's not the best way. That really there should be a much more dynamic and free flowing nature of constituencies. And it's true that Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada would have a much more natural kinship with places like New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont than with, I don't know, with Ontario, right? So, yeah, or Quebec, yeah. So, okay, now, right now you've got the X or Twitter account for Atlantica private. Is that by law, or you're just trying to reduce engagement? So the Twitter account is basically shut down, so you can't see even the old tweets. Because I'd like to see the old content, to be frank. Because I'm just saying that Atlantica put out all these short press releases that I used to get emailed to me, and I loved them. And I would like to include a link to a few of some links to these in the show notes, because it is a wonderful archive of ideas for the most eastern part of Canada. I'm just looking at the map here on my wall. And at one point in the future, who knows? There might be a band of youngsters or people with a bit of fire in the belly who want to revive this idea. And then you could share what you've learned from your nearly a decade of involvement with those young men or young people.
I'll do that later. I'll look into it. I don't know whether Elections Nova Scotia contacted uh, Twitter X and had them make it private, because when I was ordered to delete the account, I said I'm not going to do it.
Oh,
I'm not going to censor, and that's basically scrubbing history. I'm philosophically against it. I would be violating my own conscience and ethics by doing that, and I'm not going to do it.
we'll follow up about that because I would like to review that archive. I agree with you. It's history. It's an important part of the political history of Nova Scotia that a new party brought new ideas, and they weren't so ideological. They were trying to just disrupt the status quo, the problematic status quo, and offer new ideas and be more responsive to constituents who felt like they were left out of the discussion. As you say, the man on the street understands the need for this party. We hear the media and all these teacher unions and the professors who really are a distinct class of their own, but they have a disproportionate voice and make us think we're in the minority when we care about classical liberalism. So we're not. A lot of people relate to these concerns. So, but let's just try to wrap up here. Let's say you are a young person, you're a new graduate coming out of X or St. Francis Xavier University in Antigonish, and you want to make a home in Nova Scotia long term, and you're concerned that, yes, that this whole have-not attitude has become entrenched. What would you say to him about either reviving the party or about getting involved in the political world at all?
Starting a political party in Nova Scotia or in Canada, isn't really very easy. It's difficult. Rather than actually start a new political party, a better approach is what we've seen the socialists and communists do for many, 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 many years, is to get into organizations and subvert them. So join like the progressive conservatives and, push for those classical liberal values. Subversion has worked very well for socialists. The left side, for classical liberals, I think they may want to learn a lesson from the success of the left, of socialists and communists, and simply get into an existing organization and try to get into positions of influence and steer policy, in a more freedom, prosperity oriented direction.
Yeah, and just my limited experience with the Progressive Conservatives or Conservative Party in Canada is that yes, you are, if you're more of a libertarian type of person, you would be a minority there, but there wouldn't be that much hostility towards you. They have a big tent, they've got social conservatives, they've got more kind of, I don't know what business types. And there's a wide swath of people, and it's just that when you have a big party like that, you kind of it has to be that way. So especially if you go to their major conferences, there'll be a lot of people who you would find a kindred spirit with, right? So, okay, let's leave it there now. So, people, if you want to follow Ryan's work, go to cynic.me, cynic.me, and we'll work on getting more of this Atlantica Party history available to people who want to learn from its experience, because many people think that starting a new party is the way to go. Maybe it is in some instances, maybe it's not. It does have some value, as Ryan explained. Otherwise, I appreciate the work that you and others did. I know it was a bit of a thankless job. I appreciated what you did for this part of Canada, part of the world, keeping the flame alive, you might say, of independence and the independent spirit. And I hope whatever work you go towards now in the future, that you can find fruitful, you can have an impact, whether even if it's not in this party, that there's still some change happening in Nova Scotia. It's a beautiful part of the world with such a lovely history. There's even a bit of a Celtic, Scottish history there. They're trying to revive the language. There's so much richness there. So
Street signs here are in Celtic. Not all, but some street signs are in Celtic.
there's a Celtic school up near Antigonish, up in Cape Breton from memory. Yeah. So anyway, thanks for your time, Ryan. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fergus.